I know it's a global audience, so very exciting. And we'll get right into it. But I do want to just quickly introduce myself. So I am the founder and chief revenue officer of Mission Flywheel, revenue strategy firm focused on helping growth-minded companies really make sense of their revenue organizations. I'm also the co-founder and chief revenue officer at Atlas Primer, which is an AI tool for conversational role play. We're helping sales organizations speed up their deal cycles, their time to market, their overall performance in market. And so I'm excited actually to be speaking on behalf of both today, and I'll show you exactly what that means. But the focus here really is to talk about sales, and specifically what we're here to talk about is empowering salespeople who maybe don't see themselves as salespeople and maybe don't believe they have the training or the experience to be effective. And my hope is when we're done here today, you'll have a very different feeling and be a lot more confident. Just a quick bit of introduction. I mentioned what my companies do, but my background, I spent a lot of time in the media and advertising industry. I was a digital agency founder years ago and exited that business, worked at Google for about 6 years in global automotive partnerships with big automakers and leading strategy for the sales organization aligned to the automotive vertical globally. And enjoyed that work until one day I said, I'm ready for something new. And I started to work in EdTech, which is also how I navigated my way to this conversation today. So I'm excited about all the potential for technology to improve our abilities as human beings. I don't believe that today's conversation is really about AI removing people from the sales process, but rather making us smarter, better, stronger, performing better, and ultimately succeeding at a higher level. So let's get into the slides. I will assume you can see my slides. If you cannot, somebody please let me know. Let's talk sales. These are real conversations on traction, strategy, and growth. So 3 objectives for today. And I'm hoping I can hit all of these thoroughly. If I don't, please keep me honest. Number 1 is we want to empower confidence selling by reframing sales as an act of service. And what that really means is let's not look at it as some science that we have to study, but rather let's just be ourselves. When you are out in market as your best self, you give yourself the best chance of success. Number 2 is we want to review real-world tactics that we can apply immediately. So these are really just actionable steps you can take, whether you have all of the infrastructure at your disposal or not. The goal here is to improve deal flow. Let's get more deals. Let's close them quicker and more effectively. And finally, demonstrate how conversation and iteration can drive lasting sales enablement. So the simple act of practicing all of the conversations, all of the little nuances that go into a sales dialogue, a sales cycle, and ultimately a fruitful relationship. A lot of these can be simulated, and that's where we're going to show you how Atlas Primer can affect change. So jumping right in, I'm going to break this down into 3 segments. And the first is really going to be about preparation. We're going to talk about the mindset shift that we want to set in motion to get over whatever fears we might have about being a salesperson. From there, we'll talk about how to pursue. And this is a lot more operational and tactical. This is about all of the boxes you can check, all the steps you can take to be effective. And finally, persuade. So once you have that meeting, how do you make the very most of that opportunity? It's harder and harder to get meetings nowadays. And there are reasons for that, but those reasons kind of don't matter. You do what you can to get the meetings you have. And when you have that time, you utilize it to the fullest. So we're going to prepare, pursue, and persuade, and we'll jump right in. But before we do that, there's an interactive component. So you see this QR code at the top left. I'm going to ask you to quickly zap that code with your phone and just one answer. This is a one-question survey, and I'm interested to know from the audience, where are you stuck in the sales process? This is not an exhaustive list, but hopefully this at least gives us a sense of how we're feeling about all of the things that go into selling. So I'm going to stay quiet for about 30 seconds while these answers roll in. Okay, I'm going to give it about 10 more seconds. Hopefully no one's running into issues with the poll. Starting from the bottom, I'm noticing that there are a handful that don't have votes. Can't get past the first call, unclear on my niche or my ICP. I fear sounding too pushy. Great. So if nobody is worried about these things, we're off to a good start. Looks like we're actually getting a lot more votes now. And there's a nice distribution here. There isn't really a clear winner on this list, but it looks like about close to half of you are saying either my outreach isn't landing or I struggle to close. Now, these are two very different issues. The outreach is obviously early in the cycle, whereas the close is that last mile, the last inches really of that journey. Another one here, I don't feel confident selling. Well, I'm glad that one has risen to the top because that's one that we're going to really address head on. So I think we'll be able to kind of drill down on each of these. So just to reiterate, the three big ones here are, I don't feel confident selling, my outreach isn't landing, and I struggle to close. Okay. Last call for votes. If anyone didn't get a chance to vote and what you are struggling with isn't addressed in the presentation, we have the Q&A for that, but we'll move right on. So in the prepare section, I'm going to ask you to forget everything you thought you knew about sales. And I'm not trying to be provocative here. I'm actually trying to just simplify the conversation. We're going to start with something maybe a little bit unexpected here. This may or may not be well known, but when you look at the number of advanced degrees out there that are given to people in the US aligned to specific functions represented in an organization, it's very telling about the art and science of selling. So what do you see? Law degrees, you've got almost 100,000 graduates a year. So you can see how a chief legal officer might pursue an advanced degree in law, a JD, in order to qualify for that role. It's hard to imagine someone rising to the ranks of chief legal officer without that kind of training. Engineering, similar story, right? Computer science, this is not surprising. These are highly technical subjects. These are subjects that require a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of study. There's a lot of reasons why you would spend years investing in this degree. Even functions like marketing. A CMO may not exclusively have an MBA with a concentration in marketing, but it's probably more likely. And even in operations, it's not a common degree, but you still find people that have a COO title and might even have an advanced degree in operations of some sort. What you don't find is an advanced degree in sales. Schools don't teach it. Why don't they teach it? Well, we could spend a whole discussion talking about why, but that's immaterial. The fact is they don't. Nobody really studies sales at a institution of higher learning because sales is not comprised of that kind of subject matter. Sales is something that we all practice, whether we have sales in our title or not. And I would argue that means we all can be good at it. If you've ever had to persuade somebody to make a decision, if you've ever had to get somebody to adopt your point of view, ever go to a restaurant and say, I don't want to go there, I want to go here, poof, you're in sales. And I think it's an important mindset shift that we all have worn that hat, even if our title does not reflect it. So examples of what this looks like in your own organization. Have you ever seen a finance director or a VP who has to get people on board around their vision for what specific financial data might mean? HR people are masters of selling to candidates. So once an internal panel agrees that this is the right candidate for us, what happens? They flip over to selling mode and they try to get people to want to join the company. The same is true in ops. If we have to advocate for a specific investment in technology, ditto in legal, if we have to try and walk a fine line between managing risk and innovating. So the point is, in every department of the company, people are selling, regardless of whether sales is in their title. The intention here is to empower you to think of yourself, whether you have the sales title or not. I know there are a lot of founders on this call, people that are responsible for driving the business in small organizations where they wear a lot of hats. Don't fear the sales hat. It's one that you're actually uniquely already qualified for. Another way to think about it is your product. So there's a common, well-known adage in the sales development world that companies like Craftsman and Black & Decker that sell power tools, well, they're not really out there selling drills. What are they selling? They're selling that hole in the drywall that the contractor needs in order to do his or her job. That's called solution selling. You're not selling the product. You're selling the benefit that the product conveys. If you walk into a tire retailer like a Pep Boys or a Discount Tire, are they selling a circular piece of rubber, or are they selling safety and the perception of that security? A pharma rep shows up in a doctor's office. Are they selling pills, or are they selling the peace of mind and the relief that comes with that? And one more example, cloud solutions, very technical product, requires a lot of explanation, but at the end of the day, aren't you just selling convenience, the ability to have your data and your applications and your processes at arm's length 24/7 versus sitting on premise in some machine that may or may not be responsive when you need it? Convenience is a solution that we almost universally are always in the mood to buy. So think about it in terms of solution selling. You're the expert on your product, which means you should be the expert on your solution. And that's the first giveaway here, that if you understand that intuitively, as you should by running your business every day, then you're uniquely equipped to solution sell on your own behalf. We're going to do some myth busting here. So I want to show you a couple of words that people will sometimes associate with great salespeople. And there might be, a common thread here. These people are supposedly extroverted. They're people that are good at schmoozing. They're sometimes very aggressive and pushy. These are people that can be really charming, maybe a little fearless, not afraid to, dive into the shark-infested waters with all the other competitors, certainly competitive. And finally, the showmanship, right? These are people that like to kind of strut their stuff. Is that true of great salespeople? It can be, but it's not by necessity a hallmark of great salespeople. I would argue that effective salespeople who thrive over the arc of their entire career are not the people that possess these particular characteristics, but rather some of the truths about great salespeople are they know how to show empathy, which means when you listen, can you play back to that customer what they're feeling before you get into, can I fix it for you, right? They're curious. They ask probing questions which get to the heart of the matter. They're self-aware, so they know exactly what they are capable of and what they are not, and they don't try to put up this ruse or this keep up this appearance that they can be all things to all people. Yes, they are confident. They are not necessarily confident with the level of showmanship that we see on the last slide, but they're confident because they know that they've got their product behind them and that they believe in partnership with this client, they can solve a real problem. They're resilient. Sales cycles are only getting longer and more complicated with more people in their midst. And it takes resilience to power through and really focus on that end goal of not just closing the deal, but solving that problem and doing so hand in hand, lockstep with that customer. They are adaptable. Yes, They know how to pivot when curveballs get thrown at them, when a last-minute objection comes in that might knock them off course. They know how to adapt. And finally, they are exceptional at follow-through, which means they'll take the initiative. All of the things that have to be happening, they depend on that forward motion, and somebody is accountable to making sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. And so if you possess any of these, whether or not you have sales in your title, you can be good at sales. So hopefully that helps to paint a picture of what the real sales pro looks like. I'm going to give you a quote here. May or may not be familiar with Zig Ziglar, one of these, among sales trainers, sort of a household name. Zig's been in the game forever. And one of the many things that he has told people in his years of training hundreds of thousands of people across many industries is that people don't buy for logical reasons, right? So we're obsessed with this idea that the problem our customers face can be boiled down into a data set that we can then demonstrate through our own data the ability to rectify. That helps, but usually people just buy from somebody they like. There's oftentimes a half dozen or a dozen people showing the data, and the data always looks good. Nobody uses data if it doesn't make themselves look good. But what happens? Well, the person who really built the rapport is the person that wins the deal. And so if there was a pie chart of all of the things that help activate those emotional reasons, you can see them here on the right. You know how to build credibility. You know how to ask probing questions and establish common ground. You keep your promises. Notice these are not technical skills. These are soft skills that manifest throughout the sales cycle. I'm going to wrap up this section with some recommended reading. Throughout my career, I've read a lot. I've also asked a lot of questions about what's the best thing to be reading to really build a good skill set. And I'm going to give you 5 here. And for you avid readers, if you exhaust all 5, feel free to get back in touch. I'll give you 5 more. But the first one is Made to Stick. This is all about separating the best ideas from the rest of the pack. And when I say best ideas, I don't mean the ones that make the light bulb go off, but the ones that are portable, the ones that are easy to convey so that the person listening, the recipient, knows how to pass it on to the next person. And it's how network effects are created. Love Made to Stick, widely applicable beyond just sales. To Sell is Human is a great book. This is just a book that is an encapsulation of the mantra, you don't need to be trained in sales to be good at sales. You can start with just some very basic soft skills and then augment them from there. How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is probably the most famous of the books on this slide. This is probably close to a century old at this point. And it's really just about how to treat people, how to be memorable, and how to create real partnerships. The Challenger Sale takes that to another level by explaining it in the context of technical selling and really putting your customer a little bit in the hot seat, making them a little bit uncomfortable, and using that to actually drive action. And finally, New Sales Simplified. This is tactical and operational. This is the answer to your prayers. If you're saying, I think I know all the principles, now I just got to figure out how to weave it into my business operation. Okay, so that was section 1. This is the preparation, as I said earlier. This is the mindset shift that we know we need in order to get ready to now pursue that business. And that means nurturing these relationships into actual opportunities. So how does that handshake, that initial conversation, all that affinity you create, turn into something that shows up in your Salesforce CRM as a real commercial prospect? I'm not going to lie, there's so much in this topic that we could be doing a whole week-long seminar, so I'm going to have to skim the top, but hopefully I do a good job of this. So this slide is designed to be a little bit paralyzing. These are all the different technologies that go into the revenue generation process. Everything from the most tactical way to drive better engagement in a single channel like the telephone, to the automation architecture underlying all inbound leads to score them and route them and prioritize them. You see marketing channels like social media. You see databases. You see tracking technologies. The point here is it's intended to be paralyzing because I'm not asking you to check every single box here. I want to drill down and answer a simple question, which is if we had to just pick one to really invest our energy into today, I'm going to say that's the CRM. The CRM, if nothing else, you want to make sure you've got that CRM not only up and running, not only are you comfortable with it, and everybody who is customer facing in some direct or indirect way is well versed in how to use it. Because the CRM is really your central nervous system for all customer engagement. And at the risk of stating the obvious, there's no revenue without that customer engagement. So let's double click on that CRM. There's 1,000,001 things you can do in that CRM. I'm not going to boil the ocean by trying to hit every single one in this conversation, but I will talk to you about people and deals. You've got a fancy database, a bunch of names in it. It's your Rolodex, but it's so much more than that. That's the people. On the deals side, you're basically tracking activity relevant to your commercial opportunities. Now, this sounds simple, but there's a whole lot that goes into it. So on the people side, these are the things that I think on day one you could be doing. Now, you may be a little further along. Maybe you're checking some of these boxes. Before you're ready to go back to that slide with all the other tiles on it, let's make sure we're checking all of these boxes. So you have their contact info, you know where they sit in the organization. It helps to capture some personal details too. It's never a bad thing to know when your customer's birthday is. If they mention their dog and they clearly are obsessed with their dog, find out that dog's name and record it somewhere. You will be glad to have that information. They might fit a certain persona. If you have a level of sophistication where you can put them in that box versus the other box, it will come in handy down the road. And an overall level of qualification, even absent some sophisticated scoring mechanism, if you can basically just say, hey, look, on a scale of 1, 2, or 3, is this person someone that fits? Even in broad strokes, this will be helpful. Now, on the deals side, you're tracking very different things. You're tracking momentum. And so now you're moving beyond people. You're thinking about the actual organization, because there are going to be multiple people associated with the one customer you're trying to close. Yeah. So who are they? What roles do they play in that sales process?
For 4 minutes.
We've got a number of other sort of boxes to check here. Think about the deal drivers. Think about who owns the budget. Who's got the authority to sign off? Is there a procurement timeline? Is there a budget cycle you need to align to? Do you know the value of that deal and the probability of the close? Capture all this stuff, keep it top of mind, because you want to be able to segment your deals according to this. Now, I don't want to make it sound like this stuff is as easy as snapping a finger. And that's how, as driving my business with Mission Flywheel, I partner with customers to actually activate at a granular level and check these boxes. But suffice to say, you need a roadmap. You need somewhere to start. I'm hoping this slide is helpful to you in that endeavor. So on the people side, if this was to get a little more tactical, what would it look like? Standardize your data fields and formats. You don't want to create more work in the process of doing the work. So make sure that you have some mechanisms in place so that for example, every customer has a company name associated. They got to have an email. It'd be nice if you had their LinkedIn, right? Use consistent formats. When you're capturing contacts, you want to get everybody in that you can. And that means every time you book a meeting, make sure that that contact information gets pulled through. It wouldn't hurt to also go and connect with them on LinkedIn. Invite them to follow your company's page. Do all of this stuff. Make it part of the workflow. You can do some additional manual work to tag and segment them. You will be glad to have this information. Your marketing department certainly will. And ultimately, if you can set up automations, platforms like Salesforce, HubSpot, Dynamics, these CRMs have all of the automations. So if you're in the habit of taking meetings over Calendly, just connect the pipes. It takes about 90 seconds. And now every time somebody books a meeting through Calendly, not only is the name and the contact info pulling through, but now you've also got the actual engagement, that meeting is recorded. Ditto with Zoom. If you use an AI note taker like Fireflies or Fathom, all of that stuff can get pulled in. The less you have to manually do it, the happier you're going to be. This is a way to sort of get a head start on the people data side. On the deal side, you're going to need a process. You need stages, right? So think about your deal cycle. Now, if you're a new company or you don't have a lot of structured data to do this, your intuition is as good as anything else, at the start. And think about what are the different stages. And you want to focus on stages that have clear delineation between them. The worst thing you can have in a sales process is ambiguity between the stages. So what does it look like to research a prospect? It should look very different than the act of conducting outreach and doing the discovery call and eventually qualifying them. This doesn't have to be your process. This is just a kind of a one-size-fits-all that could be helpful in lieu of something a little more bespoke to your organization. And we'll come back to this diagram in a moment, but for now, I just want to get you acquainted. From there, if you think about those stages, those are on the y-axis now. Your process, you really want to have a number of columns that basically differentiate each process. So in stage 1, your objectives are going to be very different than in stage 7, where you're pushing for the close, right? The activities that you're doing, the assets that you're depending on internally or externally, the actions that you take in the CRM to record progress and keep it visible to your sales leadership, to the other stakeholders, right? The qualifying steps, you could argue, is the most important one, because that's what says, if we check these boxes, we are ready to move on to the next stage. And finally, the stakeholders, who needs to be kept in the loop about your progress. So if you're a young company and it's early days, this might feel like overkill, but I guarantee you, if you set the process in motion early and you do a minimum to keep these stages and these boxes populated, you're going to find yourself with very valuable data. And I'll show you in a moment what that means. But I'll also give you an example. So what would it look like to do the aforementioned? This is sort of a generic sales process. It's using the same exact stages on the y-axis. And now you can see, what does it look like to populate qualifying steps? Well, it looks a little different in stage 1 compared to, for example, in stage 6. We haven't moved out of the negotiation phase until we have a countersigned master service agreement and statement of work, right? It couldn't be more obvious than that. So you'll get the slides afterwards. I'm not going to harp on these examples too much because it's really just intended to be illustrative. But what I want to show you is how valuable the deal data can be. So think about, why would I do all that work? All of the aforementioned tagging and sort of record keeping, that's extra work. Why do it? Well, what if you had data at scale that could tell you something about your deal cycle that you didn't already know? So imagine, for example, if you're tracking all of this diligently, after some time, you now can start to look at what percentage in each stage will advance. Now, this is fake data. I'm just using it to illustrate a point here. Imagine 85% of the contacts who get researched advance to the next phase. That's typical, right? And these numbers will fluctuate, but maybe we find that in the opportunity phase, barely over a quarter of them are getting through to negotiation, and that's low. That's a weak link. What's going on there? So that might be a red flag to RevOps, or if it's a smaller organization, it might be the CRO or the exec team to dig in and try to understand. And that's where you go from quantitative to qualitative. And you say, well, it's a half dozen deals that are dragging this down, so we need to diagnose this, right? Similarly, how many days do they remain in each stage? So this is not about the binary outcome of did they advance or not, but this is how long are they lingering? Most sales leaders will tell you that the silent killer of sales organizations is not the deals you lose, but it's the deals that just don't seem to win in a timely manner, and they sit dormant forever, just collecting dust. And those can be an absolute killer. So what happens if we look at the data and we say, wow, they're sitting in the opportunity phase for well over a month on average? What is going on here? And so that gives us another data point to go in and diagnose. You pull together the deal teams and you say, all right, what are the persistent challenges we're seeing? And it makes you much more effective. So that is the answer to the question, why would we do all this work? Okay, I've given you some tactical guidance. There's obviously a whole lot more to everything I just showed you, but at least at a high level, I'm hoping this gives you some ideas. And so what does it look like to get out there and do it? Well, on the outbound side, it's a bunch of small things. It's the sum of a lot of these little actions you can take. Go through your LinkedIn network, find people that might be a fit, either as a customer or an enabler, somebody who can refer you, somebody who could be a channel partner, or even just a valuable sounding board or an advisor. You want to ask people for introductions. You want to use the contacts you already have. And on we go. I don't think this bulleted list needs explanation. It's really here intended to be a reference. But I have a similar list on the inbound side, because outbound is somewhat finite in nature. Yes, you could go out to the infinite audience of the world and spray and pray with mass email campaigns. There are still people in August of 2025 having success with this approach. I think that those people are becoming fewer and fewer, and it's the famous Seth Godin mantra about permission marketing that is finally starting to manifest, which is that in this day and age, AI is making us better at scaled communication, but AI is also the backbone of all spam filtering and basically the way that customers hide from salespeople. So do you want to get in the race to the bottom, or do you want to focus more on the inbound, where you go out there and you share value? You put it out there into the ether through social media, through in-person events, conferences, maybe some targeted editorial, maybe it's video, webinars, whatever it might be. You go out there and offer value, and people will find you, and you pull them to your point of sale or your place of business or an introductory phone call versus elbowing your way in. The two of them work in tandem. Hopefully this list is helpful to you. That is how you get out there and start putting some of this new mindset to use. But now we get to the most interesting piece, which is great. So hopefully, some of this stuff has been useful, and we're accelerating. We're getting better at scoring those meetings and actually getting in front of a targeted customer who could become, a real, asset to our business. Okay, we want to solve their problem. You want to practice. Persuasion doesn't happen without practice. And Atlas Primer is a tool that I want to show you because I think it's a great way to sort of break through and achieve what you're trying to do in a controlled environment. So I want to disclose that I am a co-founder at Atlas Primer. Our mission really is to enable salespeople in the age of AI to augment their human skills and to prove to the world that there are still a lot of things that happen between salesperson and customer that cannot be automated, that cannot be replicated through a large language model. And so we want to use AI to actually augment what makes human beings great at selling, at solving problems, at partnering, and building trust and rapport between organizations. So, like I said, practice is in the middle of it. You need knowledge. You can't show up to a meeting completely ignorant of your own product and what you're trying to solve. You want to show up confident, and practice is the bridge between those. And what we're aspiring to do here is not just give you some words of wisdom, say, hey, practice is important. I urge you to go out and do this. We want to go one further and say, we're giving you a safe environment to do this. An environment in which at your convenience, 24/7, you can practice without having to pull in a sales leader and use up their valuable time. Repetition, incredibly valuable. The ability to do something 10 times over and over and make small little optimizations all the way along the way is incredibly valuable. You do want feedback. You don't want your practice going into a black hole without getting something back that can help you iterate. And really, we built the platform to be progressively difficult. That's an important part of what we're building. But I want to anchor this in some actual sort of science as well. So we'll look at some of the research coming out of the academic community to put this in context, starting with the importance of retention. These are selling increasingly is becoming the art form of boiling down technical, complex concepts into something that's digestible to your audience. It's the same whether you're selling software or a medical solution or legal services or insurance, right? I mean, complex products require crisp communication. And that means you got to know a lot about your product. And you can't be looking at your notes when you're in that meeting, because that's go time, right? So just repeating the subject matter improves retention immeasurably. Beyond that, just the feeling of confidence that gets created and is sort of instilled in the protagonist does build up over time. And so we found this study from about 15 years ago showing that there's a measurable increase in the level of persuasion and confidence that's perceived just by repetition. And finally, performance. So top performers in any field, this has been demonstrated decades on end, and the sort of flagship study goes back to the 90s, which is that we found that when you put in the time with deliberate practice, not only are you retaining the subject matter better, not only are you more persuasive, not only do you feel more confident, but you're just better at what you do. And personally, in my experience, talking to sales leaders over the course of my career, one of the things I've always asked people that have been in the game longer than me, I always say, what is the thing that has, really separates the winners from everybody else? And the most common answer is, these are the people that put the time in, and they just do it over and over again to achieve that edge. So another quick poll for you before we get into the demo. So I see we're moving along on time here. So zap the code and answer a very simple question, which is, which AI-powered sales role-play scenario is most interesting to you? Whichever one wins here is the one we're going to pick. And you can see there's a nice variety here. There could be less overt sales scenarios, such as anxiety in public speaking. That's not just about selling, but people feel that. That's a very real thing people deal with. Effective cold calling is always one that I find people have strong reactions about. Nobody likes cold calling, even though I would argue it's some of the best boot camp style training for a productive career in sales. Cold calling has the early lead. Let's see, it's zooming out of the gate, but handling a difficult customer is quickly nipping at its heels. I'll give you about 30 seconds before we get into the demo. So far, no votes for consultative client discussion, delivering customer support, or managing anxiety. Okay, we're now neck and neck, cold calling and nailing the elevator pitch. Clearly, if you're a founder, we all know that feeling of being in front of an investor and saying, all right, this is my one chance. I've got 90 seconds. I've got to nail it. So that's very much a sales scenario. And that goes back to my point earlier. You may not have sales in your title, but you're really there to sell an idea and sell them on the vision. But it looks like cold calling is running away with the gold medal here. So I think that's what we're going to go with. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your votes. We will now get into the role play, and we're going to do cold calling. So Atlas Primer, like I said, this is an AI-powered conversation platform where you can simulate all of your sales conversations according to personas. We're going to look at a very boilerplate example, but suffice to say, you can also do custom scenarios where you upload your own documentation about the product, about the sales process. Maybe you know some of the common objections that come from these customers. You can scrape their LinkedIn profile and put that in just so you get a little more of a unique personality profile. There's a lot of things you can do, but for the sake of today, I'm going to show you a cold calling scenario right off the shelf. And I'm going to give you a couple data points just to sort of put this in further context. Majority of buyers are expecting sales reps to show up and listen to their needs. And also a majority of the deals, going back to this earlier point about the scourge of sales organizations, these deals that sit on the shelf collecting dust for an eternity, they end up in that no decision state. Why? It's not usually because of a poor fit. It's not because of lack of budget or a competitor came in. Usually it's because there was some breakdown in the dialogue. And so let's keep those in mind as we get into the demo. Okay, at this point, you're going to be looking at my screen in the Atlas Primer platform. When I start the scenario, I'm going to assume you can hear not only my audio, but the AI bot on the other end. And I'm going to go to the cold call scenario, which actually we just call sales call training. So let's look at the details. You can see there's a description here. So what are we doing in this simulation? Well, we're playing the role of a sales rep doing a cold call. I'm going to make up a company and a product just to sort of illustrate the technology. And what do we have to do? We have to introduce ourselves. We want to identify her pain points. We want to present the solution and link the product to those pain points, handle those objections, and if we have time, conclude the call, make sure that there's some clear call to action. Rebecca is the name of the customer on the other end. And here's a little bit about her personality and her background. I'm not going to read it, but you can see that we've got a nice little dossier here of what to expect when we go into a conversation with Rebecca. So let's jump right in. I'm going to use pure voice mode, which means I don't get to see the transcript in real time. I'm just speaking to a screen.
All right, you've got my attention. What's your pitch?
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for taking time to meet with me. I'm wondering, do you find a lot of meetings in your organization have unclear next steps and don't always achieve the impact that you're looking for?
We strive for clarity in our meetings, but like any organization, there's always room for improvement. What solution are you proposing to address this?
I'm proposing that you use our solution, which unifies communication channels like Zoom, Slack, WhatsApp, email, CRM, and consolidates all the action items from a meeting and distributes them across team members so that everyone knows what they're doing.
Streamlining communication sounds useful, but I'm curious how your solution integrates with our current systems and what kind of training is required for our team. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, the training piece is easy because it's an overlay to existing technology. So apart from learning how to navigate the UI, there isn't a steep learning curve. Now, the integration piece, we have over 500 partners, all the major platforms that I know you use, and we give you a sales engineer and a customer success rep to make sure it's a smooth transition.
That's promising, but I'm interested in specifics. How does the solution handle security, especially given the range of platforms it pulls from? Security is a non-negotiable for us.
Totally agree. I don't blame you for that, Rebecca. So the way it handles security is that everything is encrypted as it comes into our servers and goes back out. We are GDPR and CCPA compliant and really look to be a leader in the field of information privacy. Are there any specific concerns you have about security?
It's good to hear you're compliant, but I'd need to see a detailed breakdown of your encryption methods and data handling policies. Also, how does your solution manage access control and user authentication across different platforms? I'd need to ensure that only authorized personnel have access to sensitive information.
Those are good questions. Because I'm presenting to this lovely group of people, I'm not going to take any more of your time, but I suggest that we schedule a call with our head of information security. How's it looking in the next week or two?
That sounds reasonable. Let's arrange a call for next week. I'll have my assistant coordinate with you to find a suitable time. Looking forward to getting into the details.
And we'll end it right there. While we're generating feedback, I'm going to say I'm glad that she agreed to the meeting. I wasn't so sure that I had given her enough to agree to the meeting. Sometimes she doesn't. And looks like I was given overall a 7 out of 10. I hit some of my goals. And you can see these insights are very actionable, right? So the first place my eyes go is the areas for improvement. What could I have done better? I could have shown a little more enthusiasm. I could have given more examples. That's helpful for the next time. There's a tonality analysis, so I can see that, yeah, maybe I was sort of friendly, but I could have been more friendly. If I, as a salesperson, pride myself on showing empathy, I could have probably done a better job, right? And so this helps me understand, where I can improve in the future. My manager could be looking at this. The sales enablement team could be looking at this. The point here is that we get a lot of actionable feedback. And if I want to do this 10 more times and really try to get a 10 out of 10 score, I can go and do that. But I'm not going to belabor this anymore. I'm just going to go back to the slides so that we can wrap up here. I want to give you a chance to do this yourselves. And so you can jot down this URL and code. You can also, when we send out the slides, you can refer to it then. But I'm hoping that this can make each and every one of us a better salesperson, whether we have sales in our title and sell for a living, or whether we don't have sales in our title. I would argue we still sell for a living. So thank you so much for your attention. We've got a little bit of time for Q&A. And so Mariana, if you want to take over from here, that'd be great.
Awesome. So I will turn the recording off and I will let people raise your hands and ask the questions, or if you prefer, send your questions over the chat and I will read them out loud so Paul can answer them. Give me a second to turn the recording off.